Motion on the floor that the agenda be adopted as circulated, moved by Councillor Correll, seconded by Councillor Lackey. Any discussion, any additions, deletions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And carried. Next item is declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Are there any declarations to be made? I see no declarations at this time. Number 4 is in camera, and there is no in-camera session this evening. So we'll move on to number 5, which is delegations presentations. And tonight we have Julie Servant, Executive Director from the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Network, to give us a presentation. Thanks. Please come forward.
Do I have to turn this on? Okay, thanks. I'll just start off by doing a land acknowledgement. The Frontenac Arch Biosphere was established on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee and Algonquin in 2002. Indigenous people have and continue to occupy this region as caretakers and knowledge holders despite being displaced, and our organization is grateful to operate on this land and to uphold connection with land through our programs. Next slide, please. We also recognize that there are many languages spoken throughout the biosphere, including French, English, Anishinaabe, and Geniangeha, and we recognize the predominance of English in the region, and FAB will actively seek opportunities to support language revitalization. So I was here about 4 years ago in 2019, and so I'm just going to do kind of a little bit of a recap of why we're a biosphere, what a biosphere is, and then get into some of what we've been up to for the last little bit. So a biosphere reserve is a designation by UNESCO, and they are nominated by communities. In Canada, we're now using the terminology region due to the confusion around the term reserve, meaning either an Indigenous community or conservation in a protective bubble or a place in a protective bubble. And a biosphere is a geographic region that has been designated as being special because of its biodiversity, the research and work that goes into conservation, and education for sustainability. We're different than UNESCO heritage sites because our focus is regional and on nature and sustainability. The Frontenac Arch Biosphere region is governed as a not-for-profit with a volunteer board of directors, and we call ourselves the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Network. We're located within a land area from Sydenham along the St. Lawrence River between Gananoque and Brockville, and then north from Westport to Athens. Oh, sorry, I haven't been saying the slides. Next slide, please. The biosphere is based on a part of the Canadian Shield that connects the Adirondacks and connects to the Adirondacks and is surrounded by sedimentary rocks. So the different rock types create different soils, which attract different plants and therefore animals. It's a good example of how everything is interconnected and reliant on each other. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the Frontenac Arch area has approximately 72% forest cover and functions as a wildlife corridor. One of the more rare tree species and habitats is the pitch pine and associated barrens that you'll find along the St. Lawrence River. Next slide, please. This degree of habitat variety leads to great biodiversity, and there's many species here, and unfortunately many species at risk, and we aim to bring awareness and support for those species. Next slide. But biospheres are not just about the plants and the animals, they're about people too. So the FAB region is a rural area with a population of approximately 84,000, and Lees in the Thousand Islands makes up about 11% of the population. And this past year has been lots going on, and we've been able to meet our target of contributing to education, conservation, and sustainable development, which are the 3 functions of biospheres. Next slide, please. And so we provide programs for all ages. In 2018, we expanded on the FAB Nature Camp model at Land and Bay, which has now been running for 20 years, and created 3 more nature camps. And the paradigm of this model is to create opportunities for children to connect with nature. They're outside all day and have the chance to explore the area where they live. And each site is different and can only happen through our partnerships with the land stewards, as the biosphere doesn't own land. Offshoots of the Nature Camp program are intergenerational events such as CDC for Kids and Forest School. And the nature program hires between 18 to 24 seasonal employees every year. Next slide, please. Also in 2022, we installed 7 story walks in the biosphere. These are a series of display boards that showcase a selected story in a way that can be enjoyed along a trail or in a park. The stories selected for this particular project have emphasis on themes connected to Indigenous culture, nature, conservation, and the Frontenac Arch Biosphere region. We've installed one at Kendricks Park. And I think that we can all agree that these nature-based programs are important for the health and well-being of young children and their parents. Next slide, please. We finally had our first in-person Youth Climate Action Summit at the Aquatarium this year. It's a big win for us. This is a year-long program that engages youth, and the summit itself is youth-led and is the launching point to connect youth with climate and environment experts and for them to create climate action plans for their schools or communities. This program places youth as stakeholders in climate action and is solutions oriented. FAB's education programs aim to provide youth with opportunities to make real and tangible differences in their communities, and it helps them deal with climate anxiety that many of them are coping with. Next slide, please. Our sustainable tourism program, which we started last year, is multifaceted. Our website is the launching point to introduce an accessible one-stop shop website to promote sustainable tourism in the greater FAB region. It links businesses with land and water-based trails and routes, promoting both active transportation and rural tourism. We're working on trail signs and counters right now to understand usage, and we've started the process for road signs. So if you're interested in trail signs, you can contact us and we can have some made. And the picture in this slide is a mock-up of a potential highway sign that might go up. Through this program, we've provided sustainability training to local businesses who registered in the webinars, and those are now free to view on our YouTube channel. Ultimately, FAB invests in people, so they invest in the environment, which means long-term benefits for everyone. This initiative in particular will leverage the UNESCO name and expand the reach and marketability of the region as a distinct and diverse tourism destination, and it will capitalize on the shift in tourism trending toward a demand for more sustainable and local travel options. Our funding for this program was significant, but had $0 for admin or overhead. Next slide, please. In 2022, all 19 Canadian biospheres entered into individual contribution agreements with Environment Canada to assess local areas as potential protected and conserved areas that will count towards international conservation targets. So these include areas whose primary function is not conservation, but where it happens regardless. So this is kind of what we're focusing on. And currently there are only 4 of these areas identified in Ontario. Maybe 6 now. I think we passed 2 of them recently, so 6 now. An example of this is the Queen's Biological Station, where the primary purpose is education, but conservation happens regardless. Through this program, FAB can provide information not readily available or captured elsewhere, and this can be used for assessing your conservation lands or to bring conservation measures up to reporting standards, thereby enhancing your conservation work. This does not impose regulatory restrictions on lands. And I've invited Christine today, if you had more questions about this particular initiative. She is the conservation coordinator with FAB. So additionally, municipal contributions to conservation can be recognized both nationally and internationally. Our challenge is to find matching funds and to build capacity. We're expected to raise approximately $300,000 over the next 2 years. And tonight we are requesting $11,000 from Leads in the Thousand Islands to help support FAB to meet these goals. Next slide, please. In 2022, we received, this is kind of an overview of our budget from last year. Last year was a really busy year. Lots going on. I think we brought in close to $1 million in grants, and we hired 10 people. We received in here, the revenue is from the nature camps, which ultimately goes back into the program to support the following year. So it's kind of a rolling budget. We also received 3 federal contribution agreements, which are captured under the grants here. And ultimately grants are temporary and don't provide sustainability. So we'd like to see this dependency lowered. Overall, we're supporting municipalities because this grant money goes into the communities here. Next slide, please. Right now, we have really good momentum and synergy between our 3 program areas. And to keep this going, we need local support and investment. We've been able to provide programs and services for very low overhead, but this isn't sustainable or realistic. And supporting FAB means we can invest and impact the community in ways that the municipality maybe can't do. Some benefits are we're offering the opportunity to share the knowledge we're generating, such as relevant conservation, tourism, and sustainability data. We're attracting environmentally conscious tourists. We're engaging with teens for climate action and environmental issues. We're connecting children with nature and enriching their summers through affordable programming, offering free family activities, connecting people with nature, and we can help leverage FAB's reputation for conservation. Next slide. More and more people are realizing the importance of nature and its contributions to people, and I thank you for considering our request tonight.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It's good to see you in person after so many years. Can't believe it's been since 2019. Any questions from any of the councillors? Go ahead, Councillor.
Excuse me, through you, Your Worship, on the page FABN sponsorship, which is on my agenda, toward the bottom in the ask, it says that Leeds and 1,000 Lions represents 11% of the population, and you're asking $11,000. Am I to make the connection that you're actually asking for 100,000 from all of the municipalities based on a percentage basis? Is that what you're doing?
Correct.
So $100,000, and you had mentioned that your funding is how many millions?
Well, we brought in $1 million last year, but we're looking to raise 300,000.
And so is that federal, provincial, any other sources?
We have to match federal funds. So they can't be federal funds that we match with.
Okay. Are you associated with wildlife, World Wildlife Fund, or whatever its incarnation is now, Eco Canada? Are you associated with them at all?
We're not associated with them. I'm aware of them, and we've spoken both with World Wildlife Fund and had internships with Eco Canada in the past.
Thank you.
Further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. In your pie charts, one of the things I noticed was a large increase in the revenue for this year. Is that because last year with COVID still happening that you didn't have as much revenue potential?
It's kind of a skewed, I would redo this if I did it again, but it's kind of a skewed perspective because the income in the 2023 pie chart, the grant that we have for the sustainable tourism isn't included in 2023 budget, or a very small portion of it is. So it really skews the amount of grant funding that we have and just makes it seem.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I like your presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
And reading it at home there, it was a number of points of interest. What is your fiscal calendar year?
It's January 1st to December 31st.
Okay. The ask from us is for this calendar year?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to see how this was going to fit an already approved budget.
Well, this is a delegation.
Yes.
Even though there's an ask coming from the delegation, it would have to come forward in the form of a motion. Or we could also potentially direct the organization to the grant process for this year, because we still have a grant intake. I think the one for April's closed this week. So that's not necessarily helpful, and I apologize for that. But so there might be other ways that we could help for this fiscal year, and then entertain this presentation or this ask would be more timely when we're in budget preparations, which is usually September, October. Is that right, Madam Treasurer? Okay. So that's not to say that we couldn't consider doing something, but it would require a notice of motion coming forward from after this delegation. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Lackey.
Thank you, Worship, and through you. Historically, do we not normally or annually give money to
Fab?
the Biosphere? Yeah. Was that just an oversight during budget time?
I don't recall having an annual stipend going to FAB. The treasurer's not saying it. Sorry, I'll recognize the Julie. She's got her hand up. So
I think we missed the timing in 2019 when we came, and then stuff happened. But we have been applying to the community grants for the nature camp program.
So we have been supporting
Yeah.
through the nature camp, but as per your delegation, you're looking for more sustainable grant fund, or not grant funding, but sustainable funding for ongoing preservation of the biosphere and the work that it does.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Any further comments or questions from councillors? Go ahead, Councillor Fody, go follow up.
Thank you. Your current children count or youth count is approximately what?
What do you mean?
The number of youth you're working with in the summer months.
Oh, well, the nature camp, I think there's 144 spots
Okay.
for the entire summer at 4 sites.
Right, I saw that.
And then the Youth Climate Action Summit, so that's more teens, is about 100 youth once a year.
So just for clarity, that's a tap out. That's a max that you want to see. Or you would entertain more if they were available.
I think as far like for the nature camps, I think that is maxed out because of our desire to keep each site location small enough so that we maintain a 1-to-10 ratio and the kids get like a more foundational experience. It's
Right.
not huge. And then the idea, like, it took a lot to get to 4 sites, and 4 sites is a lot to manage. And so I think it depends on our capacity to be able to add more sites for nature camps, which would mean more spots.
I do know from what I've heard personally, it's well received.
Yeah,
Definitely. The nature camps are a very important piece of the fabric of our community, especially in the summer. It provides educational and fun activities for kids to do during the summer months. And luckily my kids benefited from that when they were younger, and we were lucky to have land and space so close to home. And now to have the expanded number of spots actually is great because it serves the greater population of the township. So it's much appreciated. So if there's no other questions for the presenter, what we'll do is we'll have further discussions and then look for a way to either bring back a notice of motion, or we'll speak to you about the granting program. But and this is applicable to any group that's looking for support. We would need to see you in the September, October, or have this on file for that time to consider it for the 2024 budget.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is staff reports. So first staff report is administration report SR-061-23, vacancy options for the office of Councillor, Ward 2. Motion comes forward from Councillor Gorell and Councillor Lackey that the committee of the whole recommends the council declare the office of Councillor, Ward 2 vacant, and that the committee of the whole recommends that council directs staff to proceed with option blank to fill in the vacant Councillor, Ward 2 office. So the item is left blank on this motion for us to put the motion on the floor for discussion. And so there was a report that came forward from the clerk. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. And I will take questions from the group. Go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
Through you, your worship, just for clarification, should this motion be divided out so we first make the declaration official that the seat is vacant and then proceed with the rest of the report?
So that's point of order.
No,
The
we don't
clerk
have to.
says that we're good.
We're good?
We're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Comments in regards to the motion that's on the floor? We need to have some discussion on which option it is. So whoever wants to go first, Councillor Lackey and then Councillor Foti.
Thank you, your worship. I really don't want to be the first one, but I'll take a stab at it. I've gone back and forth on this since Wednesday night as to what we should do based on pros and cons. And I find that the one thing that stands out amongst all four, it seems to be representation of the ward. None of the four indicate for sure that there would be ward representation exclusively. It could go anyway. And then basically after that, the staff time, typically on an election year, we don't have meetings per se, for we've got 2 months of not a lot of anything other than preparing for the election. So our staff is busy with that, and now we're forcing them into double duty as far as, you know, running the day-to-day business that you're seeing now, and then adding on top of that, running a full-scale by-election. So that's worthy of mentioning as well. I would not be in favor of a by-election. And adding to that, of course, is the money to do so. Now, in saying that, there is the advantage of it's one of the only ones that gives the the voters a chance for their say. But to get to the nuts and bolts, I'm looking at options 2 or 3 under the above in the report. I think going out for the application process would certainly provide everyone gets a chance, all wards, to put their name forward so that we may get representation from Ward 2. We may have applicants from other wards who are more than qualified. So I think that's, for me, that seems to be a compromise. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So Councillor Lackey is leaning towards option 2 or 3, depending on further discussion. So I have Councillor Foti and then Councillor Raw on the list. Go ahead.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, your worship, and through you. About the very same time we had this presentation sent to us last week with the various options, I received a few phone calls, and we actually have interest in the Lyndhurst area, if you want to refer to it as that, of people who are interested in the seat. So I would think that option 1 would be out. I just feel it's not transparent enough for us to just pick one individual when there's perhaps more than one individual would like a chance at this position. And as for option 3, I'm not in favor of any election just because of the cost to replace one seat. So my personal choice would be option 2. Just a question for our clerk. If we appoint option 1, it's just as it says, we're appointing one person that somehow we magically come up with a name. But if we appoint option 2, then you yourself would put out a presentation for people to submit their names or someone else's, preferably with their approval.
Madam Clerk, can you speak to that?
Yeah, of course, through your worship, that's correct, Councillor Foti. And if council were to proceed with option 2, I would seek direction from council regarding the deadline for the application process.
Okay, so does that answer your question, Councillor Foti?
Almost, if I may have a follow-up for the clerk again. If we were to go option 2, what would be a pleasing deadline? We would make that decision at next Tuesday night's council meeting, I assume? Or we could make it tonight?
Go
Through
ahead.
your worship, council has the option of making it tonight. Council also has the option of making it at the April 11th council meeting, just in consultation with the clerks and looking at what past municipalities have done. They have given between 3 to 4 weeks for this application process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk, Councilor Fody. Okay, so leaning towards number 2 here, Councilor Grell, you're next.
Thank you. Through you, your worship. It's only fair that the community gets to hear our thoughts on this. So it's one of this situation is you're not happy until I'm not happy kind of situation here. First point, there's no requirement for a candidate to live in any particular ward. You can be anywhere in the township and parachute into any ward you wish. Secondly, this is not a mayoral race. 30% turnout, 31% in this past election was probably in large part because the mayor was acclaimed. That position was acclaimed, in my opinion. Thirdly, most of the business that comes to this council is not ward specific. It is indeed township specific. I won't give you the number, but it's got to be 99%. How often do we really have a ward specific issue? Next, the candidates from previous election have had the opportunity, and the public has had the opportunity to hear them speak in public forums. If we go and do an application process, which I read today, then there are 5 questions. Its suggestion was 5 questions get submitted. They write it down. We review it. That is not the same thing as a public meeting, which the candidates that were in the 2023 election or 22 election were part of. So on balance, that says me, I'm not in favor of holding an election due to the cost. And I feel it's unnecessary given a 30% turnout and what I mentioned about it not being a mayor race. In terms of the requirements or sending out a broad application, I have no doubt there people may step up, but they had an opportunity to step up before. So in fact, what I'm telling you, my opinion would be I'm in favor of number 3, and I would consider number 2. But number 2 has that weakness of the very transparent nature of the application that drags, and I don't know that it answers the questions. What 5 questions, really, if you don't mind me saying so. So that's what I would have to say tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so based on Councilor Garrell's comments, option 2 or 3 are on your mind. 3 preferably, and then 2.
3 and a distant 2.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then Councilor Jameson, please.
Of course, I'm up there. And to Councillor Garrell's point, your worship, I take your point about decisions that have to be made around the table with respect to the business of council moving forward is 99%, affects everybody all the time or not, depending on how it works. But it is very clear to me, based on the feedback I'm getting, that there is a desire, a strong desire, to ensure that whomever and however we go about it, that we try to identify somebody who lives in the ward. There's a lot of other cultural things going on that are not necessarily connected to the business of council, because that's the way it is in the world. So the jury's out for me. I'm inclined to go with an option that opens it to the interview process. Because I am hearing there are people who would, under those circumstances, put their name forward up there. The reason I just want to say something else, that for those of us that were in Ward 2 through that last election, it became really problematic in some respects. But at the end of the day, the two successful candidates of the three captured close to 85% of the vote. So that tells you something in terms of the commitment to open government. So I think that, you know, you look at it and you say it's a cost to do a by-election and everything else, but that ensures that candidates can be encouraged to step up in Ward 2, and we would have to pick from Ward 2. I mean, we wouldn't, but the people would. So the by-election would be in Ward 2 for Ward 2 people with Ward 2 candidates.
Anybody can run from any jurisdiction, any ward.
In a by-election?
I believe so, yes.
I'm reading this wrong. Okay. So the by-election is an option. I would presume that the nature of an election, if it was a by-election, that undoubtedly people in the ward would be looking for qualified candidates, and they would be able to find people. So I don't think, I'm just trying to dance around it a bit. I don't think our experience in the last election with some of the stuff that went on is really reflective of the mentality of the people of my ward. And I think they would like to see someone, and I'm hearing this from everybody. So how we go about it, okay, this
So would your preference be number 2 then?
more likely to 2, if, you know, the by-election appeals to me, but not if we can't make it a Ward 2 by-election. I mean, I understand, I mean, because I guess I'm misreading it, but
The clerk can provide some clarity if that's.
yeah, I would appreciate that.
Go ahead.
Through your worship. So just for clarification, any eligible electors may submit their nomination papers and run in the by-election. So similar to a municipal election, and then only eligible electors in Ward 2 may vote in the by-election.
But only eligible voters in Ward 2.
Correct.
Okay, so that's where I missed. That's a good point. That's a salient point. I'm sorry. For a minute there, I thought it was open season. Okay, so I'm back. That is the advantage of the by-election, that only the people in the ward will vote and are more likely to vote, quite frankly, for somebody that lives in the ward. And I dare say we will see people step up. I understand the cost. I understand the whole challenge of democracy has always been messy and expensive, but it has a value. Having said that, the option, which is equally as murky, but probably the most doable from my point of view, is option 2. So
Okay.
I'm sitting on the fence.
So I've heard from Councillor Lackey, Councillor Fody, Councillor Grell, and Councillor Jameson. Councillor, maybe you're last.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through you to all. Again, my choice is number 2. Again, I do believe that we do have qualified candidates within the boroughs in the north that can probably do this job. And as Councillor Fody alluded to, potentially there are some that are willing and able. Having been the recipient of the last time, this was actually a choice. And I know that it was done differently at that time, but I also know that there was some very open discussion on the process that it took. So, but for me, option 2 is where I am.
Okay. So I have a hand up in the gallery. If you would like to step forward and approach the microphone and state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Peter Brannon, Brannen. I'm a retired teacher. One of my areas of teaching was math, and my first comment would be off the cuff, a response to, and I do live in Ward 2, would be a response to the Honorable Mr. Jameson with regard to his use of math. As you all are well aware, in our riding, we had two votes to select a candidate. And the two successful candidates each had approximately 700 or plus votes. However, those supporting the third candidate could only vote once. They could not provide two votes to that candidate as per the regulations of elections. And therefore, to say 85% voted for the two candidates is an abuse of the math, in my view. Respectfully, Mayor, through Madam Mayor, through you, I speak for numerous residents of Sealy's Bay and area in support of option 3 under consideration, and in support of the over 400 voters that cast a single vote for Mr. Jackson just months ago. Despite having 2 councillors represent Ward 3 since last fall's election, we have already had 3 issues poorly handled in Sealy's Bay by this council. 1, the lack of a drop-in dock use by voters, which was just days ago finally resolved satisfactorily. 2, the pickleball lines that Sabera had asked in September 2020 to have painted on our, quote, tennis court, end quote, which only last fall were instead painted on the open basketball court, actually discouraging pickleball play. And 3, and just recently, the lack of consultation with the Sealy's Bay community with respect to the use of the community hall above the fire station, disrespecting the many Lions Club volunteers, which has generated a petition against council's decision. I might take issue with 99% of your business being at the entire municipal level. I do recognize it's certainly a vast majority. Perhaps that's part of the problem that we feel in Sealy's Bay. Although Sabera makes requests to this council, it is a private organization in both bylaws and action. It has done many good things for the community in the past. However, its small board decides who can be a member and can expel members for any reason without appeal. Although guests are permitted at meetings, only the AGM is advertised to the public. And I believe Mr. Jameson is a member of Sabera. Although guests are permitted at meetings, only the AGM is advertised to the public. It is in design and function a private interest group. The over 400 people, voters who supported Mr. Jackson in Ward 2 deserve a voice into this council. He has and continues to demonstrate his commitment to all voters in Ward 2 and in fact across the municipality. Appointing him through option 3 as the only person running in the last election months ago who expressed interest to actually do so, make the effort, and do the door knocking is the easiest, least expensive, and the right thing to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the gallery? Come ahead.
So my name's Jason Page, and I've spent 19 plus years in the military, to which I've given broken bones, severed tendons, and problems with my lungs that I suffer with every day. I did that because I believe in democracy. I think there's only really 2 options that support that. Everything else is put there for the intent that if something like this so unfortunate event happens, that it's meant to be at the end of a term, not the beginning of a term, when you look for somebody kind of in an emergency situation. So we have really 2 options, and that's number 3. First of all, and that is because that person is the only other person to run, and they're the runner-up. So realistically, people have voted for that person and shown his support for that individual. And I think that that makes sense. The only other option for democracy is to have another vote. Now, there is a cost to that, but there's a cost to democracy to which people give their lives for. And we're talking about $30,000, not somebody's life. I just spent the last 2.5 months, well, not the last 2.5 months, but 2.5 months within the last year plus in the Ukraine doing just that, working to help support people for democracy. So I believe there's only really two options. To Gurel's point, and oddly, the first time I think we've agreed really on anything, and I appreciate it, is that, you know, it is open to other wards. But to the point that's made earlier is Ward 2 that makes that vote, and Ward 2 makes that decision. So Ward 2 can decide whether they want somebody from their ward simply by looking at who lives in that ward. And so it's up to them to make that choice. We live in a township that has about 14 to 15,000 people. 10,000 of those are voters. It's a very small community. The ward system is really probably not necessary for something like that, since you've already said 90% of business comes from the entire community, and we should be looking more towards that. But I only see really two options that support democracy and really support what people have already said they want. Thank you.
Councillor Grau.
Mr. Page, may I ask a question just for my own clarity in what you've asked? Would you be asking there to have an election?
No, my first point is to just appoint JP, who'd be
Okay.
the next person. And if you're not going to do that, then an election.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I see no other hands up from the gallery, but I'll go back to council members who've had the opportunity to hear from the gallery. Councillor Lackey and then Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, if I may, to the clerk. As far as going to the next candidate with voting, because you're eligible to vote in any ward, or sorry, run in any ward, as I did twice now. And I know of another councillor that lived in Ward 1 and ran in Ward 3 in past elections. Does it go by vote across the entire township, or does it go by vote in that ward as far as the next one in line?
Talking about appointment from the last election.
Okay, so thank you through your worship. So sorry, you're looking for more clarification on option 3.
Yes. So basically, if we took the next person with the most amount of votes, is Ward 1 and Ward 3 included in most amount of votes, or only Ward 2? Because it is possible
Because it's open.
because it's open to everyone in the township.
That's really up to the discretion of council and who you choose as that candidate. Again, staff have provided advantages and disadvantages for each option. But again, that is up to council's discretion if you choose to pursue that option.
So just for my own clarification, Councillor Lackey, you're talking about the person with the next highest vote count regardless of ward. Okay. Sorry, you have to be recognized. So I have Councillor Jameson, and then I'll go back to the gallery. Or sorry, Councillor Fody, I should say. My apologies.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a little history lesson. I believe it was election of 2014, if I'm not mistaken, that there was a plebiscite vote to retain the wards or to abolish them. The vote was to retain them. So there still is a strong feeling among residents to retain the ward process. Thus, the representation from Ward 2 quite strongly likely should come from Ward 2. I can't imagine if I threw my name forward to the residents of Lyndhurst as an option that I would even be considered as one. But nonetheless, it's what I'm hearing here tonight. Number 2 keeps coming off pretty much everybody's lips here in one way or another. Thank you.
Okay. So is there a further comment to be made? I'm going to limit comments to 2 per person from the gallery because we do need to move forward with our agenda. So we need to make a decision. So if you'd like to come forward to the podium.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for my outburst. Not knowing the process, I didn't know if I had another opportunity to speak, so I do apologize. Your own staff recommendations have summarized the advantages and disadvantages of each. So far from the gallery, you've heard people supporting option 3. And you've heard at least one councillor and perhaps 2 say that 3 would be either preference or equally preference to option 2. I think it's important that council be seen to act in a democratic fashion since it is a democratic organization. Staff's own recommendation was that option 3 would be less democratic if you pursued the path of selecting somebody outside of Ward 2, someone who has not been expressing an interest to represent Ward 2. We already have such a person. And I don't understand, perhaps except for perhaps personal reasons, which I think over time maybe are no longer as relevant as they once were, that perhaps it's time to revisit the most democratic choice and the one that represents the voters of Ward 2 the best. And given the experiences of the Sealy's Bay and area residents over the issues I've described, it's obvious that there is a need to have someone who's really focused in certainly our area of Ward 2, and I'm sure other local areas would be appreciative of that same focus. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So do you want to follow up, Councillor Garrell? And then I'm going to make some comments and then I'm going to.
Peter, I'm sorry, I didn't catch you there while you were at the microphone. Again, as I asked Jason, I just want to ask, in your opinion, then, to help me out, I do understand that you'd like someone from Ward 2. Would you like an election?
I think an election is, quite frankly, a waste of money. I think an election serves perhaps more backroom politics and personality influences than an actual representation of the people of the Sealy's Bay area. And I think all of Ward 2 in that regard, since the 400+ votes that Mr. Jackson received was from across the ward. And like the other speaker, who I do not know, by the way, I feel very strongly that option 3 is the most democratic, assuming that you do not pick someone who ran for another ward, who obviously has already shown through their actions that they're not interested in Ward 2. And I think I think having displayed that, I think we should believe them. Thank you.
Thank you for your clarity. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so we've heard from Councillor Lackey. Councillor Lackey, you had put a preference of 2, then 3. Councillor Fody had put a preference of 2. Councillor Garrell. Oh, sorry. Oh, I apologize. There's a question online. Sorry, I had the report up and not my Zoom screen. So I'll recognize Kathleen Yeomans.
Thank you. And can you hear me okay? I don't have a headset on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify, I think it was Councillor Lackey that asked the clerk about if we went to option 3, would it be the one with the next highest votes? And she said it was sort of up to council, I think. In that case, if that was the case, you would be appointing someone who had 0 votes from Ward 2. They may have got more votes because they were in Ward 1, because that's where most people go to vote, but they didn't get a single vote from Ward 2. If you went to the next highest person with the votes. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the point you'd like to make?
Well, yeah, that's an objection I'd certainly like to make, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Wouldn't go to the next highest.
We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
So, oh, I have another, come on ahead. So we have another comment from the gallery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name's Angela Kelman. I live in Lyndhurst. As you may be weighing in comments from the gallery, and I happen to be here this evening, I thought I would let you know I'm very actively involved in the community. There's been a lot of conversation in the community over since the staff report was published, and a tremendous amount of interest in what's happening. I've heard across the board, they want representation. People want representation, as I do myself, from our ward. And of the 4 options presented, option 3 is the least favorable from what I've heard from everyone. I think something also to take into consideration, and something I've heard over and over again, is in terms of who ran in the last election. Part of the reason that a person may have chosen not to run is because they were very happy with the representation that we had in our councillors from the previous term and didn't want to run against them. So that may be why someone would choose to run now or be interested in the position now that wasn't interested in running in the or didn't consider it in the last election. So that's a factor to consider. And as I say, I'm really involved. There's been a lot of meetings and informal meetings and meetings at the junction and things over the last few days. And that's just what I'm hearing, especially in Lyndhurst. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I will weigh in on this because as of right now, based on what the councillors have spoken to, it seems that number 2 is the more favorable option. But I wanted to say a few words in regards to the whole of this process. So since I've become mayor in the previous term, I've seen the opportunity of 2 other municipalities who have used what is provided to us in the Municipal Act, different ways of replacing a candidate. Obviously, I saw it happen here before my time with Councillor Maybe with the 3rd way, if you will. So Rideau Lakes is currently in the middle of a by-election, and that I don't think the vote has happened yet. It happens in May. Thank you. And the previous term of council in North Grenville, their deputy mayor left midterm and they had to replace that individual and use the interview, take applications type process. The good news is that the options are provided to us in the Municipal Act because they all work, regardless of what choice that the council chooses to make. So I don't think there's any wrong choice here this evening. All of these options were provided to us through the Municipal Act to be enacted at the need. And it still saddens me to say that we need to use this at all. We were fortunate to have Councillor Olkey as here as long as we did, dedicated public servant, not only in his career, but also to the community that he adopted. So in saying that, based on the comments and the questions, or the comments that have been made both from the gallery, the public, and the council, it does seem that option 2 is the most favorable with the most number of people. Unless there's any last comment to be made, I would look to fill in the blank with number 2. Councillor Gorell, go ahead.
What is particularly challenging, and through you, Your Worship, and to council, what is particularly challenging and bothers me about number 2, although on its surface it appears reasonable, but what we've been hearing from the gallery tonight, in my opinion, is that Ward 2 would like to have a say in this. So reading the suggested application for appointment process form, which is attached, the appointment procedure still puts it right back into this council's hands, even though you could have 10 people, 23, whatever. A few questions are asked, a few minutes allowed to speak, it still ends up right back here, which by my definition does not answer the Ward 2 concern. Ward 2 people, it appears to me, would like to be in charge of their own direction. And it makes it very challenging for me to say, excuse me, that, excuse me, that brings to highlight the election. not a choice I had walked in here thinking I was looking at. But I don't want to discount Ward 2, excuse me, if there is a strength and people are wanting that, because I don't get much correspondence from Ward 2. But if we're going to do this, I don't think it's us sitting around this table who don't live in Ward 2, from what I've heard, and from the strength of Mr. Jameson's comments about Ward 2 being pretty involved in this. I don't see, or pardon me, I suddenly find myself leaning toward an out-and-out election for Ward 2. And I would like to take further the comment from Angela. I missed your last name, so I apologize. She made the point, and I think it's extremely valid. She made the point that people were probably discouraged from running in Ward 2 because they liked what they saw and they knew in their minds how that was going to go. I believe that, and I've always believed that. So therefore, I think I wouldn't argue strongly against number 2. I just want to make that point that takes it, it's still not fully in the hands. Yes, people can present themselves from Ward 2. Is that how we want to do this? And I just don't know yet. Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. Are there any last comments? Councillor Jameson, I'll give you the last word.
Well, last word or not, I think, fact or fiction gets thrown around like crazy, and it's the nature of the game. I know that I'm in contact with literally hundreds of people a week by my own effort. Yes, I think if we went with option 2, we would attract some interesting people. And I've been hearing this over the last several days from Ward 2. Granted, it is open to the entire township. Notwithstanding the concern about having somebody from Ward 2, I also heard that we should just simply appoint a specific individual and that will be the end of it. And so our options to go to 2 would open it to people, some of whom were, I don't think, discouraged by the fact that they saw that perhaps Councillor Oakey and Councillor Jameson were reasonably competent. I think a lot of them just decided that we were going to be okay again. And obviously that was the overwhelming majority. So option 2, if I'm going to die on a hill, I won't be trying to get an election, because I understand that even people in the gallery are concerned about going to an election. And I can certainly understand why they'd be concerned about going to an election. But having said that, I'm going to support option 2 now that I've heard all the voices, because I think it gives an opportunity for people in Ward 2 that want to step up with a credible idea of what we should do is the route to go. And I'm sorry about, there were facts and there were fiction, but here we are. So that's the end of that.
Okay, so based on the comments made by the councillors today, the majority of the councillors' first choice was number 2 as the option. Councillor Fody?
Thank you, Your Worship. Are you looking for someone to make a motion?
No, the motion is on the floor. We just have to fill in the blank, and I'm just trying to build a consensus to fill in the blank. And so Councillor Gorell's first choice was number 3. Sure.
Just further comment, because we really haven't delved into this, but this application for appointment is just a
this was the suggestion. So
A
the actual, this would not be the verbatim how it would happen.
right. So therefore, do we need to look into that a little bit, or are we satisfied that if we move forward with the process of number 2, that is the process? We haven't even, I mean, you read it and I'm a little uncomfortable with it for the reason that I previously stated. And there is no municipal act definition on all this This is just something that is put forward thoughtfully, and I appreciate apparently wanting to be transparent. Is there any tweaking of that, or do we discuss that later?
This is a recommendation that goes to council, so we could absolutely make changes
Change
to
that.
the, if there were suggestions
In-
on the actual process.
All right, maybe that needs to be
Fleshed out.
talked about, fleshed out. Thank you.
Follow up.
Well, it wasn't the last word. So what I'm trying to understand here, and I think I understand where Councillor Gorilla is going. We can support option 2 if that's the route we go, but the pro forma
Has not been,
has not been developed. So we pick the option and then we look at the pro forma. Is that the next step?
because this was just an example. Correct, Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, that's correct. I do want to say, though, that council has to either, so if council were to pursue option 2, so within 60 days of declaring the vacancy, which would be essentially April 11th, we would have to fill the vacancy with that process within 60 days. So the deadline would be June 11th for that.
So it could be construed that if the recommendation was to come forward with number 2, that we could develop a better process that would satisfy and maybe give 2 options at the next council meeting to go along with this, to be added to the recommendation.
Through your worship, that's correct.
All I'm thinking was if that was the will of council, we could easily go to North Grenville and ask them how they went through their process, because it's local, and I'm sure there's another municipality that has used this option as it's part of the municipal act. So there's some work that could be done, but we need to declare the seat vacant because we have, 60 days after board's passing to do so. And then we have a further 60 days to wrap this up. So go ahead.
So if I'm here, I just want to mention that South Frontenac also did an interview process, if I can
Frontenac?
put it that way.
Thank you.
So it's one to look at because it's on the video is online. So if it's 60 days from when we pass it, within 60 days when we pass it, which could be tonight and next week, 60 days from next week, within which to develop the pro forma and move into the process. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, that's correct. Again, the deadline to fill the vacancy would be June 11th. So there could, depending on how things go and how you would like the process to be for option 2, we could be potentially having some special meetings in order to
Yeah,
be
your
meeting
worship,
the
that's where
deadline.
I was going on that. If we needed to have a special meeting, we could have one in order to
the
nail down the
process.
pro forma, correct? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so based on that, I'm going to fill the blank in with number 2 based on the discussion. So I'll read the motion moved by Councillor Gorell, seconded by Councillor Lackey, that the committee of the whole recommends the council declares the office of Councillor Ward 2 vacant, and that the committee of the whole recommends that council directs staff to proceed with option 2 to fill the vacant Councillor Ward 2 office. Any further discussion on that motion? So, Madam Clerk, you have something to add?
Through your worship, I know we're not setting a deadline tonight for the application process, but I think in the resolution we should include and that the clerk bring back a report regarding
So we
the
need
option
an
2.
amendment. So we need an amendment to the motion.
Correct. And just clarification on what meeting as well for that too.
So, and that the clerk
That's okay.
can work to get it done. Clerk bring back a report regarding process. And I have a mover under seconder for amendment. So Councillor Jameson and then Councillor Lackey. Okay, So the amendment reads, and that the clerk bring back a report regarding the application process at council meeting April 11th. Is that right? Okay. So all in favor of the amendment at hand? Oh, sorry. Did you have a comment to that? Oh, okay. No, he's voting in favor. Mr. Jameson was pointing at you. I thought I missed it. Okay, so the amendment passes. So the amended motion now reads, moved by Councillor Garrell, seconded by Councillor Lackey, that the Council of the Whole recommends that Council declares the office of Councillor Ward 2 vacant, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council direct staff to proceed with option 2 to fill the vacant Councillor Ward 2 office, and that the clerk bring back a report regarding the application process at the Council 11th meeting, or the April 11th Council meeting. My apologies, I wrote it backwards. All those in favor of the amended motion? All those opposed? And it's carried. Thank you, everyone, for the robust discussion. Okay, so the next item that's on the agenda is Administration Report SR-049-23 Cataraqui Conservation Full Authority Board Appointment, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council appoint blank to the Cataraqui Conservation Full Authority Board. And that motion comes forward from Councillor Maybe and seconded by Councillor Fody. So I see Councillor Lackey's hand up. Go ahead.
Are we on the table with this?
We're on the table.
Through you, Your Worship, I wonder if it might be to our best interest to defer this until the position is filled, so that we have a full table
Okay.
to.
Okay, I'm seeing some nodding of heads unless anybody really wanted to jump in and get involved and attend. Nobody's jumping at the. Sorry, I'll take Councillor Garrell's.
I would, for a 1 year period or something, I would take that position if.
As
it
an
was
interim.
interim.
Well,
But
maybe what we could do is appoint an interim appointee until we have our full council back. If that, is that something CAO, and do we know if that's possible, or that's a clerk decision? Sorry, hang on.
Through your worship, no worries. I was just letting the discussion happen. We do need someone to be appointed to,
That's it.
yes,
Okay.
for the remainder of.
just for the record, that person does not have to be a council person. I know a member of that board who was asked as a member at large from the community and sits on that board, just as a clarification.
Councillor Aki, you have something to add?
That was exactly my point, is that we have not even discussed the fact that it may be a resident that takes that seat, because I know Cataraqui typically does not have someone at that table, but they did have a past councillor fill that seat because he wanted to.
So would it be, what I'm hearing here, if we ask for a deferral till the council meeting, perhaps there could be a subsequent motion that comes back, a notice of motion this evening in regards to opening this up to candidates outside of council that were interested. Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Garrell has offered to step in, it may take us 2 to 3 months to maybe fill the position, and Cataraqui Conservation may want somebody at the table, and for our own good to have representation there that can bring back the information. So I'm almost for having him step in now, and then if we find somebody to fill the seat, then we can move forward that way.
I'm going to refer back to the clerk because the clerk has more on that.
Through your worship, another option for council is you could defer this to the April 11th council meeting. And then I can ask for further clarification on this.
That might be a better option, just because I think there's a few questions to be answered there. So who would like to put a deferral on the floor? Councillor Maybe, and then Councillor Lackey, that the motion be deferred until the April 11th council meeting. So the motion defer to the April 11th council meeting is on the floor. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is administration report SR-071-23 residential food waste diversion pilot program. Comes forward from Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the committee of the whole recommends that council direct staff to proceed with the food cycler pilot program with 100 units. Discussion on this motion. Go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
Through you, your worship, I was pretty excited to read that report, and great ideas. I thought I would just like to see one. Can we get a unit in here next week? I'm thinking of getting one.
I'm through you, your worship. I'm not sure I can get one here this quickly, but I'll ask.
It would actually be really great if we could have one as an example, and because if it's supported by council, it would be nice to do some promo with that. Because I think it is I usually reserve my comments to the end, so I don't want to usurp to anybody. So I'll let the comments come from the rest of council. Does anybody have any other comments about this? So I have Councillor Lackey and then Councillor Fody.
Thank you, worship, and through you. For $12,000, I have just a ton of questions. It's interesting because you can go online and Google this product. It's been out for years. You can get it at Costco, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it in a million places. And I'd never heard of it. So, you know, I'm wondering why it just seems to me it's a push through municipalities to get this product online for the distributor or manufacturer, whoever it may be. So I'm just going to go down my list if I may.
Absolutely.
You know, basically I see there's a return policy. Who pays the shipping on the returns? Number one, their shipping rate's a little high in my opinion, and I would look to one of my fellow councillors to know that for sure. But I mean, who's in charge of marketing this product once it's sitting in one of our back buildings? Is there a marketing strategy to go with it so that our taxpayers know that this in fact is a product or something that we are responsible for? And my other question is, what if the participant does not keep track, or you know, what's the consequence there? And it looks like the township is responsible for compiling the reports, which would indicate to me there's some staff time there as well. And to me, what I see a lot of what the participant does and what the municipality does, but other than collect the money, I'm not sure what the cycler people do. And if it's that great, why don't we buy one big one and put it in the landfill site?
There's a number of good questions and good points, which maybe we're potentially looking at another deferral to get additional information if need be. But I'll just say that we appreciate the questions. So,
And sorry, by the way, you can get it online for $429.
$429. Got it. Okay. CAO, do you have some answers to some of the questions?
Thank you, your worship. Yes, I do. The retail prices through the manufacturer that they've provided retail $500 for the smaller unit, $800 for the secondary unit. There are, because it's through LAS, provincial procurement, there are discounts available as outlined in the report. There is also a federal government grant available attached to this because it is deemed technology that is worth pursuing since it diverts food waste from landfills. The one thing that it does do, if food waste goes to one of our landfills and gets buried, it's in an anaerobic environment, there's no air. And when the food waste decomposes, it produces greenhouse gases, methane, carbon dioxide. Using the food cycler, it doesn't produce any greenhouse gases. It simply dries out the material and turns it into a highly rich nutrient. They call it foodalizer. It's not compost. You wouldn't plant seeds in it. It has to be mixed in with your soil, the 10 parts to 1 part of foodalizer. the cost for operation is rather low. It's 10 cents to 15 cents a cycle. It's like having a microwave oven run. People from the manufacturer, they've received feedback that people haven't even noticed any bump on their electricity bill from using this. The questions with regard to the support, I could have turned this into quite a long report. The manufacturer is Canadian based. It's in Ottawa. It's an exciting technology. They are very interested in getting this out to municipal governments to trial because it's a win-win. It diverts stuff that's going to our waste sites and occupying space. And it's helping the environment through greenhouse gases, and monetarily they're in a business and they want to make some money. They have quite a comprehensive support program with respect to these pilot projects. There's a number of municipalities in the area. Most closest is Elizabethtown, Kitley, I believe, is doing a pilot project, and so is Rideau Lakes. The level of support that they will do is basically dependent on how sophisticated the municipality is and how many resources that we wish to devote to it. They have the participation agreements, they have the surveys already drafted, they have communication plans that basically are templates and plug and play for promoting the pilot program. There are I think there is a survey at the start for program participants, and we're talking 100 people here. And there's an end survey. And I included some numbers at the end of the report about 4,700 households participated in pilot projects across 40 municipalities. And the user rate is quite high, that people that would continue to use the equipment after the pilot was 98%. 96% would recommend it to friends, families, and neighbors. The average number of diverted waste food byproducts from the landfill are 300 kilograms a year. So it helps prolong the lifespan of our waste disposal sites. And it also raised awareness amongst people of just how much food they waste, because you're seeing it going into this little bucket that you can keep on your counter, and you recognize how much stuff is spoilage. Speaking personally, it's just me and my wife in our household. It's because of food waste, the meat and bones and fat that goes into our garbage, because we can't compost it, because we don't want to attract rodents. That's really the only reason I go to the waste site each week, is because the garbage starts to smell. If we had one of these units going that can accommodate chicken bones and meat products and that sort of thing, you don't want to put a big soup bone or anything like that in it, but certainly a chicken carcass and that sort of thing. I probably would go to landfill with the non-recyclable stuff maybe once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. There just isn't that much stuff that we would otherwise produce. So anyway, that's just a personal thing. On the shipping and everything, I can look into it. This was an estimate that they've provided us based on other experience at the $2,000 shipping. The maintenance marketing, as I touched upon, they have all the materials that they're happy to share and support that they're happy to provide. I think that's everything. They will even help us with compiling the survey results if we need to.
So I'll let Mr. Lackey follow up, and then I'll go to Mr. Fody.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for the opportunity. You might want to check online at the reviews for the product. I won't go any further than that. I would say that, I mean, you could read for days the reviews. There's that many of them. And I will say that many are not as they say. Just for the record, it's $130 for the replacement of the pail that goes into it, which is non-stick, which depending on what you put in there, bones, all the fibrous material that it doesn't like, they would need to be replaced. Also, there's a carbon filter that needs to be replaced in them, which is $29. And guess where the carbon filter goes? in the garbage. It's not recyclable. So I see where I think it could be a good thing, and I think a lot of people would benefit from it. I just don't know if it's something I want to put my name on. There's many things that just don't, if I came to you with a great idea for a product, gee, why don't I go to the municipality and tell you how great it is? And then you'll buy a whole bunch of them and resell them for me. Good marketing ploy, but I don't see it.
So Councillor Fody, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I just clicked myself off the screen. I apologize to anybody that cares.
You're on there. We can see you.
That's fine. I'm here in spirit. Thank you. Councillor Maybe and I had the pleasure of sitting on the Waste Management Committee for the last few years with some of the staff and one member of the public. And I think any initiative that we can create or follow through on to divert garbage away from the waste site is a good initiative. Our waste site survey, our garbage survey, as some dubbed it last year, we had good response to that. And we already know we live in an environmentally sensitive area. It was presented to us tonight by Frontenac Biosphere. So we have a lot of residents here that I think would really appreciate the opportunity to try this out. And those numbers speak for themselves. 98% of the participants said they would use it even after the project ended, the pilot project. Yes, there are pitfalls to most anything. But the fact that, as Councillor Maybe and I saw firsthand the numbers, if I remember, and you could correct me on this, Councillor Maybe, the organic waste in most waste landfill sites is between 30 and 35%. So give or take a third of our waste sites is organic. We're not going to get everybody in the township for a number of reasons. Money would be one of them to buy into this, but we could get a third of the township residents to appreciate this. And I think those in cottage areas in particularly, as alluded to by our CAO with reference to smell, these might really be a quick sell in an area where you don't want to offend your neighbor by placing the garbage on that side of your cottage when the neighbor on this side is more offended than the one on the other. So I think it would be prudent upon us in environmentally sensitive areas we are and conscious as we are in this area of a green environment to at least proceed with this and see where it goes. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jameson.
That's the challenge of being in Ward 2. Councillor Fody forgets I was on the committee too. Yeah. See, Ward 2. So the other point about the green bins is, I don't know if it's gone up. It was $15 a tip. 20 now. It's gone up since the committee that I was a member of. So there is, there's a cost there. Every time I go to the dump, which isn't on Saturday, I try to go earlier because John likes me to go earlier in the week because it's busy on Saturday. Those darn green bins are full by midweek. So yes, there's a risk, and I hear what you're saying because I got very excited about this product when I was on that committee that I was on, and I looked into it quite a bit, and obviously it's experimental even at this point in its evolution, no question, but I think it's an opportunity for us, and to your point, marketed properly, first and foremost, we do have a chance to try to put a dent in that $20 a tip green bin and educate people as to what they're actually putting in there. We may win even if there's going to be some bumps in the road. So I support it. Thank you. And I'm happy to rejoin the committee if I.
Okay, CAO, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. One thing I didn't make clear, and I apologize. This isn't really a new untried technology. This is out there. This particular food cycle science These are the household units. They also make kind of big industrial units up to 1,000 liters that can handle waste generated at grocery stores. So offcuts of vegetables and that sort of stuff. So they've got a full range of products. They're mature. They've got service organization. The units come with a full manufacturer's warranty. It isn't that we're taking a flyer on some untested thing to see if it works or not. This city of Nelson in BC did a pilot project, and the results were so encouraging that the city council voted that everybody should have one of these things, and they're going about funding a subsidized rate for all of their residents in Nelson, BC to use this technology.
Okay, I have a question from the gallery, unless there's more questions. I'll take the questions from the councillors first, Jason, if you don't mind, and then I'll go to the gallery. Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through to the CAO. Just wondering to Jeff's point, the replacement parts that are required for this piece of equipment to actually operate and change out, could for the next meeting or get some more backup on how long carbon fiber or the carbon filter lasts and any other maintenance that is required to that particular unit, and maybe a breakdown of its longevity too, the actual operation of the machine. Is it after a year needing some replacement parts other than the filter, which would be fairly frequently, dealing with filters all day. But is there other parts that are on it that may break down, and potential costs and where they can get the parts and stuff like that? Because it's going to be a question for the.
Go ahead, CAO.
So the carbon filters last 3 to 4 months of regular use. We have an opportunity to buy replacement filters at a reduced rate. I think it's like $22 a unit. The lifespan of the machine is something like 7 or 8 years. You got a tickle. They have a full service desk. It's all, you can order parts. They can even offer repair services. So it's like any other consumer product out there, pretty much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Dave, the director, just to clarify something. I'm going to put him on the spot because I have a question which may or may not speak to Mr. Page's question. But do you have any concept in light of our recent unearthing, and pun intended, of the additional space in our waste site? Because, organic material, we think about it, it just breaks down and it's just part of what we do. I'm assuming based on the report that we read today is that this helps organic matter, organic waste break down faster. Therefore, if it's not in the landfill, are we gaining space conceivably in the landfill because we don't have organic matter in the landfill?
Yes. And actually, Councillor Fody touched on it earlier. 30 to 35% of the waste in the landfills is organic waste. When we put out our survey, actually, that's what I was looking for. I was sitting at the desk there. When we put out our survey, the garbage survey, 87.5% of the people that responded do not use our green bins at the waste site. So we're tipping them at a rate of, I think it's 20 bins every week. And 87% of the people that responded do not use it. So there's a significant amount of organic waste in our landfills. And I think this is one of the reasons, or one of the options, Steve sat back down, that would be viable to address that. People do not like driving to the waste site, was a lot of the responses that we received, but they also don't want to compost at home because of rodents and smell and all those types of things. So this addresses both those concerns. I think it's a really good alternative for composting.
While Dave's at the podium, does anybody else have a question for him before I have him sit down? And then I'll take Jason's question. Okay, you're released. Thank you.
So I've actually been following this product for a while because where I'm at least, we kind of process some of our own food. We raise our own chickens. We have our own gardens and raise as much of our food, but that leaves a lot of waste. And we've had problems twice with bears on our property rummaging through our compost, which is quite dangerous for my family. So that's always been a concern. So I followed this product a little bit. I didn't know that there was a larger option. So I want to know, because I do process my own chickens, that's quite a bit more waste. If in these 100 units, if there's an option to get a larger unit for places that do raise their own pigs or whatever and butcher their own, that's my number one question. Two, to the comment of waste. Yes, the filters are waste. I didn't know what they're made of. That is one thing that I have. Okay. But that's still better than throwing away 1/3 of our waste. The average family in Canada throws 1/3 of their garbage is basically organic matter. So a small kind of carbon filter is much better than that. But I do have a question to how much of the product is recyclable at the end of their 7-year life? Because if it's all made of mostly plastics, in parts, that's not helping the situation. So I want to know how much of that is recyclable plastic, how much is recyclable metals, especially when you're talking about the pot maybe having a special liner that may not be breakdownable quite in the same way. So I want to see what kind of percentage of that product is reusable. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, those are good questions. I will have to check with the manufacturer on the recyclability of the actual unit. For the pilot projects that they are getting grant money through Impact Canada, it's just on the 2 units, because the intent is to get the hands in households, not bigger processors. So they while they have bigger units available, and I'm happy to provide you with the contact information if you want to talk to the manufacturer. But for our pilot project, it's just the household units.
Okay. Okay, follow up.
And this is, sorry, this is more about the amount of waste that was spoken to about, I'm sorry, David here, where 80% of the people are just throwing their garbage into our dump site. If this project works out, is there any thought moving forward to getting the larger unit for the township itself and to use and maintain that for processing and actually forcing people to actually put their waste in appropriately?
Another good question through you, Your Worship. Not at this time, but it is an intriguing idea that it might be something that we can look at. But that's a point I've taken for sure.
Okay. So the motion that's on the floor is that the committee of the whole recommends that the council directs staff to proceed with food cycler pilot program within 100 units. I'll just say that, because it's already been vetted through LAS, and I do take Councillor Lackey's points in regards to, is this just a way that somebody's trying to market product? However, it does address, while I appreciate the, I don't want to fund somebody else's, pocketbook just for the fact that they've got an in somewhere. However, based on what I read in the report and the research that I did, this type of product does give us another alternative to dealing with organic waste. When recycling first came out, it took a long time for people to actually come around to that way of thinking. People have been composting for years, but due to the point that was made by a number of councillors, as well as Jason in the gallery, we're starting to have problems locally with, well, we've always had problems, raccoons and what have you, but then we do have bears now locally, which is something that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, but here I am. So if it's an opportunity for us to divert some waste and sort of blaze a trail to have local people show their friends and neighbors that this works and it works well for us and our family, it's 100 units. We could, if there was further conversation about how this is funded, because I believe one of your questions, Councillor Lackey, was about how much we're spending on this. I would say that we should do some more digging on what other municipalities, their results were. I know that 98% said that they would have that, but it would be interesting to see how many of the sample actually used it, because there's lots of people who will buy it and maybe not use it, or they'll use it for a month and then not use it. I would like to see a little bit more in-depth just about that sort of data. But nonetheless, I think that the idea is sound as far as, diverting waste from the waste site and as well as contributing earth and what have you, nitrates to our ground locally, like you can use your stuff in your garden rather than using eggshells, which is what I sort of do from time to time. I'm not much of a gardener, but so with that, I will call the question on the committee of the whole recommends that council direct staff to proceed with food cycler pilot project with 100 units. All those in favor of the motion at hand? All those opposed? And it's carried. So if this is obviously a recommendation coming from committee of the whole to council. If there's further information to be shared, we'll ask that the staff do so for next week as well. If you have further questions or concerns about the program, I would ask that you speak to staff. Mr. Jameson, before I get, you need a 5-minute break? Okay, it's 8:05. I'll give you till 8:15. How about that? So 10-minute break. Thank you.